Right, so could a direct assault on an already rapidly deteriorating economy be what brings Zionism to its knees? Certainly there's been a major falling out as Donald Trump's tariff addiction bites again. Clearly still not clear on the fact that these do much more damage to the US economy than they do to most other states that those tariffs are inflicted on. So good luck, as the US consumer will now pay more for pretty much every single import item going. But Israel isn't most states. With an economy absolutely crippled because of the expense of the genocide in Gaza, as well as wars it is waging in Lebanon and Syria right now for no more reason than to keep Benjamin Netanyahu in power, Israel cannot afford to lose imports to other countries, especially not to its biggest customer, the US. But as the cost of their goods to import rises, demand for them will fall, and where many nations might absorb such losses, a 17% tariff for Israel is serious. But where you might have no sympathy for the Israelis or their economy here, it is even more hilarious when you consider that Israel ditched all tariffs on US imports just 2 days ago. Right, so the tangerine-tinged economic tragedy and megalomaniac that is the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has gone hog wild with his tariff obsession and pretty much slapped tariffs on every corner of the planet, from the largest states to trade blocs to the smallest islands, and yes, a 10% tariff on the Heard and McDonald Islands very much fits that bill, along with Trump's madness, because there are no people living on those islands. They are colonies for seals and penguins. I'm not quite sure what little Donny thinks the US imports via penguin manufacture. Perhaps it's where he thinks tuxedos come from. You think I'm joking, but I wouldn't put it past him. But the most surprising tariff inflicted, not least to those it has been inflicted upon, has been Israel, with 17% tariffs on all Israeli goods, and coming just 2 days as this was after Israel eliminated all tariffs on US imports. It might be news to US citizens that for all the aid they have been coughing up and paying for that has been sent Israel's way, the US was subject to tariffs by them at the same time. But they were, and then they weren't. And then Trump drops tariffs on them himself. So expect those tariffs from Israel to at least be re-implemented, I would imagine. A trade war with Israel, though, who would have put money on that happening this year? Does it not really prove Trump hasn't got a Scooby when it comes to tariffs, no matter what he must be being told repeatedly behind closed doors? Even worse, or even funnier, depending on your perspective, I suppose, is the fact that 17% tariffs on Israel targets them at a higher rate than Western boogeyman Iran with 10% tariffs, and the Taliban-run Afghanistan too, also 10% tariffs. This is just horrendously bad news for Israel, with an economy on its knees for a multitude of reasons, all basically caused by the ongoing warring that began with the genocide in Gaza and has since extended brutally to the West Bank, to Lebanon, to Syria, and strikes on other Middle Eastern states such as Yemen. Businesses have been folding as reservists keep having to drop their lives and go to war. War is always bad for business unless you are in the arms sales game, so everyone outside of that industry is suffering. Investment and tourism have dried up, and now Israel's biggest customer, for it relies on sea trade with nations away and outside of the Middle East, where it is a pariah of decades-long standing, has imposed 17% tariffs on goods from there. They will be able to sell less, costing jobs, driving up prices domestically. Now, Trump's justification for imposing all of these tariffs stems from a belief, or at the very least a narrative, that other nations have been having it good at the expense of the US, that other nations were getting too good of a deal at the expense of American jobs and economic well-being. Imposing tariffs just kickstarts a trade war with everyone else, though. Nobody wins. Ordinary people lose out as less business gets conducted, jobs get destroyed, economic growth stalls. Trump is recreating 2008 all by himself, and the biggest losers of all are the US citizens who will be going to the shop and wondering why eggs are suddenly now $20 a carton and they have no money left. Trump is not a good businessman. He never has been. He is and always has been an idiot. And he has surrounded himself in power with even bigger idiots who won't stop him. They'll just kiss his backside as he implements economic catastrophe. Where Israel is concerned, though, they are, of course, the exception. Before lifting tariffs on US goods on the 1st of April, Israel had long imposed steep trade barriers on some US agricultural and manufactured goods. Not many, actually, following a free trade deal dating back to 1985, I believe. But still some, but these were, as I said, abolished in the last few days. What Trump has done is therefore bizarre, to say the least. What he has done is take the bilateral trade deficit from each country around the world, the amount by which imports exceed exports as that is, an utterly irrelevant starting point as that is. But for Israel, this came in at $7.4 billion. Now, what Trump did next was to divide this figure by the cost of exports to the US, which for Israel was $22 billion, giving a percentage here of 33%. And then Trump divided this by 2 to give him what he believed to be the correct tariff to impose, which for Israel came in at 17%. No special treatment whatsoever, but no sense in these calculations at all either. Israel has responded in the immediate term with, well, blind panic. Industries brace for collapse. Job losses have already been triggered, and it's sent Israel's finance minister into crisis mode. But I doubt anyone familiar with Bezalel Smotrich will feel the least bit sorry for him, as he has to focus on something else apart from settlers and displacement of Gazans and Palestinians in the West Bank. Yes, the far-right extremist who boasts of crushing Palestinian resistance and wants Gaza for Trump's vision of Gaza-Largo, complete with the total ethnic cleansing of all Palestinian land, who has praised Trump so much for his plan for Gaza, is now the guy who's having to deal with this mess. The guy panicking over Trump's tariffs, having hastily convened emergency meetings with industry leaders to try and work out what the heck they are going to do. For all Smotrich's warmongering rhetoric, and Netanyahu's to boot, this government are already struggling with wartime inflation and a ballooning deficit. And now Trump's tariffs on top mean Israel face export catastrophe, a big hit to those multi-billion-dollar exports to the US. So are the tariffs hitting hardest, and where aren't they then? Because that's important too. Well, the tariffs are only being levied on manufactured goods, so the prominent Israeli service sector goes untouched, which for Israel is good news, since this includes their high-tech sector, already being hit as that has been through lack of investment, tech startups being sold off so business owners can get out of Israel. But that still leaves 60% of Israel's economy exposed, 60% of Israeli exports to their largest customers subject to those 17% tariffs. 10% of the US's diamond exports come from Israel. Not that these are inherently Israeli, they come from the exploitation of other nations by Israel, particularly poorer African states, but is an export particularly vulnerable to price sensitivity, and Israel can lose out big to other diamond trading nations not hit by such harsh tariffs. Many pharmaceuticals produced for the US market come from Israel, so drug prices may rise for American consumers. That will be the last thing many people there will want to hear. And of course, much of the kosher produce sold on US supermarket shelves comes from Israel. So this is a particularly sensitive import line. And of course, we can't forget that all of this comes on top of the fact many people in the US will be boycotting Israeli produce already as part of the global boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. So all of this already comes on top of that drop in demand. So damage, therefore, it's not insignificant. Economists in Israel have warned that as a direct result of these tariffs, 10,000 jobs at least could be lost in the first year in Israel. Israel's floundering economy will see a drop of between 2 and 3%, pushing the country into recession, and prioritising war over the economy at that point is going to be a very hard sell for Benjamin Netanyahu. And even more investment will be lost as Israel, aside from being seen as a bad bet amidst wartime to invest in already, will lose further investment as businesses decide that Israel is now less competitive as well. So will these tariffs inadvertently put an end to Israel's warring and expansionism then? There's no cash going around. Can they afford to keep it up? Certainly a weakened currency, as this would all lead to, could harm spending. But none of this factors in the determination and madness of Benjamin Netanyahu to keep himself in post no matter what. Everyone else will have to suffer for his benefit. So I think he would be more likely to decimate the Israeli shekel all the more rather than risk putting himself out of power. But with its currency reserve shrinking, with its exports going down, it would in theory limit Israel's ability to fund the Gaza genocide and keep procuring US arms, which might send the US arms firms into a bit of a flap actually. And well, if anything would probably elicit a reversal in Trump's moves here, that would probably be it, I would imagine. It would be a bitter irony, though, that while the US is making a fortune selling billions in bullets and bombs to Israel, it is now strangling Israel's economy, very much exposing the contradiction and the fraudulence of America's unwavering support for Israel. It comes at a price. Ultimately, though, this can be seen at least in part as a self-inflicted crisis on Israel's part too, and few will sympathise with them through their loss of exports, though of course the biggest losers of all will be American consumers. Israel's leaders gambled on Trump's loyalty, that he was their mate, that he could be trusted, and they lost because Trump is loyal only to himself. By alienating other global markets with its Gaza genocide, these punitive US tariffs will be all the more painful as the Israeli economy is teetering on the brink. Oh dear, how sad. Never mind. It isn't just allies from outside Israel that Netanyahu may be losing, though, but also those within his own government too, all adding to the economic woes he's enduring at that, because the guy who might be getting a bit upset also happens to be the guy currently having to fix this economic mess of Donald Trump's making. Get all the details of that story. This video recommendation here is your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't already done so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as help support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.